Over the years, I've made countless Line 6 Helix instructional videos that have dealt with numerous topics. And since the announcement and all the chatter in the recent months about the upcoming Line 6 Stadium, I have been receiving loads of questions about what my workflow is going to be like on the Stadium. Now, I have actually played through the Stadium. I was out at the launch party or the announcement back in June when Line 6 had the live stream. It was a real honor to be there. It was amazing to get to actually play through the Stadium. And since it's coming soon, I wanted to address some of the questions that I've been receiving about it. So let's head over first of all to Helix Floor and talk a little bit about one of my favorite things to do, or actually a couple of my favorite things to do. And these have been things that I've received a lot of questions about over the years. And actually, some people even give me a lot of criticism about it because they don't really understand or they choose not to listen to my explanation about why I'm doing these things. Now, these two things I'm talking about are basically a part of a template that I've always used on the Helix that I've received so much positive feedback from literally thousands, if not tens of thousands of users, where I put a low and high shelf in the chain at some point, and I put a little LA Studio comp at the end of the chain after everything. Now, the thing about this is if these are used incorrectly, they can be very damaging to the tone, but that's why I've always been very adamant about using them in a very specific manner. So starting over here at the low and high shelf EQ, what I usually like to do, and this could possibly change, but my standard kind of default starting point settings are to set both low and high frequencies at 650 hertz. And what this does is it allows me to boost or cut the frequencies above or below that kind of center point. And no, before anybody says this, a tilt EQ will not do the same thing. A tilt EQ with that center point is going to force you to move the different frequencies in opposite directions. This will give us the ability to move one or the other, both together and at varying amounts. So it's not the same thing, because I have a lot of people always want to come and make the comment that you should have just used a tilt EQ. It's not the same thing. So basically, this allows me to be able to brighten up a dull preset or dull up a bright preset or warm it up or cut some mud or add some beef to a tone in a very quick, intuitive manner. So even if I don't use this in a particular preset, I still have it there, because if I get to a venue and the monitoring system or the stage is just sounding kind of dark, it gives me a really quick, intuitive way, bend down, add maybe a dB or two to the high shelf, and things are usually fixed, or maybe pull a dB out of the low shelf. So I like to have that in there, whether it's turned on or not, just as a safety net to tweak for a particular situation. Now going to the end of the chain, LA Studio Comp. Now, obviously, a lot of people will say, well, you shouldn't have that after your time-based effects. And there is a lot of truth to that, depending on how we're using the compression. This compressor is going to be used kind of like what its name suggests, as a studio compressor. It's going to be very subtle. I'm only going to add maybe half a dB to a dB, maybe a dB and a half of gain reduction, just to tighten the feel up of the preset. So it's really almost the type of thing that you might not even notice unless you were the one playing, or until you turn it off and then A/B it and go, oh, I kind of get what's going on here. It can kind of control some of the peaks. So the question I've been getting recently is, well, are you going to do the same thing on the Stadium? We got these new Agoura amp models. Is it going to be necessary? And my answer to that is, of course, I'm going to work that way. I work this way on every single modeler that I've ever worked on. And I'm going to show you a real world example in just a moment over in Cubase of forgetting all about digital modeling and just going to the real source, the real amp. And I'll show you how I actually use these same tools on a real recorded guitar amp. So let me just grab my guitar. I'm going to use my 56 Gold Top Custom Shop Les Paul here. Now, this tone I'm using is from my Line 6 Marketplace Placator Ultimate preset, a really killer preset based around the Placator amps we have in the Helix. Sounds like this. Has a multi-array of effects and multiple snapshots. But basically, you'll see here on the low and high shelf, for this setting right now, I have minus 2 dB on the low gain at the 650 hertz setting and plus 1 dB for all the frequencies above that. Now, if I turn that off, let's listen. Nothing wrong with that tone, but it's a little bit lacking in clarity, I feel, and it might have a little tiny bit of mud. So I bring in this low and high shelf EQ. And it cleans that right up. Now, as far as the compression goes, if I look down on my Helix, I'm right where I want to be here, about 0.5 dB of gain reduction. Now, you may not even notice if I turn this off. Still sounds fine. Now that is a bit of a volume jump there, so let me just balance this off. Okay, so that's more balanced now. So here it is with it off. Now, you may have a hard time even deciphering that, but I definitely felt it when I brought that in, and that's what I like about that. And that has nothing to do with whether the amp feels right or isn't a good version of modeling in the digital space. It doesn't have anything to do with that, and I'm going to show that in just a second. So that's this in the Helix, an example of how I would work. But let's go over to Cubase and take a look at another example. All right, so now I'm over in Cubase, and I've recorded a little guitar track here. Let me just play this for you. This is a recording of my actual Friedman Pink Taco Mark II amplifier, going through a 212 cabinet with Celestion Vintage 30s, mic'd with a Bayer M160 ribbon mic, and it sounds like this. Great, so I'm relatively happy with that. I have no idea what that's going to sound like if I go to use it inside of a mix. I mean, it might be perfect, or maybe it needs some brightness, or maybe it needs a little bottom end taken out of it. I don't know until I get to that situation. What I've done here is I've added in basically the same signal chain I would add in the Helix. So I have this, and you'll notice when you were listening to it, these were bypassed, but I have this little Neutron 5 EQ from the folks at Isotope, some of my favorite plugins to use. And I have the low and high shelf, both set at 650 Hertz. Right now, I just have it set so that the lows get pulled down by 1 dB and the highs get boosted by 1 dB. Very similar to, that got moved, very similar to what I do inside the Helix. And I have an LA Studio comp at the end of the chain after this EQ. So let's do this. Let's come in here and play this again on loop. And I'm going to, first of all, bring in the compressor and listen when I bypass and enable the compressor for any slight tonal changes. And again, this is not digital modeling. This is a real amp. I think you can see how powerful this is going to be. Now, if you're listening on a smartphone, you're maybe not going to hear this, but listen on a good set of headphones or speakers, even with a difference of 0.5 dB plus and minus on the low and high shelf, it cleans up some of that muddiness, adds a little bit of brilliance, and I think that that tone would sit much nicer in the mix. Do you hear how powerful that actually is? In these half dB increments, the changes are quite wild. Now, some people might say, well, you should have just fixed that by your mic placement. And there is some truth to that, right? But we do get the best we feel we're getting at the time. But later in the mix, we don't know how things are going to fit. So this can be a very powerful tool, much like in the Helix, when we get to a venue or a monitoring system, we realize that things are sounding a little darker now. We could use a simple move like this on the high shelf. If we don't need it, then we simply bypass it, and it's not going to do us any harm being in there. Now, coming over to the LA Studio comp, let's leave this on with this +1 and -1, respectively, on the high and low shelf. Let's engage our LA Studio comp, or the Teletronics LA2A. It's basically the same compressor that's being modeled inside the Helix. And I'm going to engage this and just set it so that you can see on the gain reduction meter, I'm going to be down around, minus 0.5 to 1 dB of gain reduction, okay? So again, I've got the levels kind of balanced now. This is bypass, this is on. So a very subtle change that you may or may not notice listening, but you do notice the difference when you're playing it. And that's one of the main reasons why I have that at the end of my chain. But it is not doing anything to destroy the audio. So down to the final question. Would I still apply these types of things to Helix Stadium with the new Agoura amp models? And the answer is, of course I would. I wouldn't change my workflow. This is how I work in all situations. If a particular preset or amp model I don't feel in a particular situation needs those, then I simply turn them off. I'm not saying they have to be used all the time. I'm not saying they have to be an always on thing. Oftentimes they are, because I find it just adds that nice little mastering polish to the sound. So yes, I will keep working this way on the Agoura amp models on Stadium, and there'll be times where maybe they'll be off, but they'll always still be there in my presets, not because they were ever needed, just like I don't know if they're going to be needed on the Agoura amp models. I don't think they're going to. They weren't needed on the Helix, but it's a great tool to have in place as a tone shaper and as a safety net that in case we do need them, they're there, and it gives us a really quick way to tweak things in a manner that's wildly intuitive and makes our life much easier. And the LA Studio Comp at the end, I just love that. Very, very subtle. And the takeaway here is don't do too much with it. If you're doing too much, I've heard people say, I tried that and it destroyed my tone. Well, that's user error. That's not a problem with the technique. User error is cranking that peak reduction up so high that you're squashing the sound. If we're already really hearing it working, we're probably gone too far with it. It should just be an extremely subtle thing that when volume matched and bypassed, it's barely noticeable, but just there a tiny bit. So I hope that that helps answer some of the questions I've been getting about workflow on Helix versus workflow on Stadium. Stay tuned. There's going to be a ton of Stadium content coming once we're able to do so. Super excited to get that out to you. I do have my presets available on the Line 6 Marketplace, including the one you heard today, the Placator Ultimate. I'll have the links below to that. And I'll leave you today with a full-blown demo of one of my Line 6 Marketplace presets, and the links will be below to everything you heard today. Thanks again so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed that video. I hope it was helpful and informative. Please like the video, share it with anybody you think would get some use or enjoyment out of watching it. Also, please subscribe to the channel, hit the little bell notification to get notified when I put new content out. I'll be back really soon with some more. Thanks again so much for sharing your time with me. Enjoy the music on the way out. Talk very soon.